You need to wake up. You're treading water, your grades are sinking, and the semester is about one more week from being flushed down the toilet. How many of you guys out there feel like that? Well, if you do, not all hope is lost. You can still turn it around, but you have to act fast. That's why in this episode of the Student Performance Podcast, I'm going to give you a mid-semester study crash course to rescue your grades and get you back on track. Let's get into it. Welcome to the Student Performance Podcast, where we dive deep into the science of concepts you never knew had such a big impact on your well-being as a student. My mission is not only to transform your life in the classroom, but help you live a more fulfilled life outside of it as well. So, this is a little break in our scheduled programming because we're getting to halfway through the fall semester, and I think a lot of you guys out there need the proverbial slap in the face and a reality check. So using the core tenets of season 1 of exercise, sleep, willpower, meditation, and mindset, I want to give you guys a plan that will jumpstart you into action. But the most important part of the episode is not just to listen to it, but you have to be writing notes. There are going to be numerous times throughout the podcast where I'm going to ask you to pause the episode and write down answers to certain questions that I ask and create an action plan for you guys to fix what's going wrong with your studying. Okay? So please, to make the most of the information I'm going to provide you, get a piece of paper and take some notes. All right? Because it's truly amazing what happens when we have a plan. I know all of you guys out there listening want to do well in school, right? You'd be watching Netflix right now or watching Mr. Beast, not listening to this educational podcast. So the drive is there. Maybe even the quote unquote motivation is there. But why don't we act and consistently study? We don't act because we don't have a plan. And maybe more importantly, even if we do make a plan, we don't feel confident in it. That fills our working memory with doubt and uncertainty, which paralyzes us to act. So the plan I'm going to lay out for you has worked for hundreds, if not thousands of students to make them consistent. Again, this is just a skeleton. Feel free to make it unique to you, but still using the core tenets I outlined that are based in science. Don't tell me you study better with your phone next to you because that's complete BS, right? But if your schedule makes you wake up at 7 a.m. instead of 6 a.m., that's completely fine as long as you're getting your 8 hours of sleep. So the crash course consists of a sleep, time management, and study section. And they all build on each other. The first pillar is sleep, and this is the foundation to your success. First, sleep is one of the most important factors in learning and memory consolidation. Sleep is when your brain recovers. If you're in college or high school or graduate school, you're going to class, studying, and doing assignments. That gives your brain one hell of a workout. The brain is like any type of muscle. If you overwork it and you don't recover, you're at risk for injury. In the case of students, in risk of burnout. Students who slept 8 hours a night throughout the semester had significantly better test scores and mental health compared to those who didn't. So we first need all of you guys to get on a consistent sleep schedule while getting 8 hours. Yes, you all need to be waking up earlier, but if you wake up early and feel exhausted and sleepy, you aren't going to be productive anyways. So to start out, you need to be setting an alarm no later than 7 a.m., and then we can start waking up earlier as our body adjusts. Waking up earlier, however, starts the night before. And the most important part of this is that your phone needs to be off at 10 p.m. The reason we don't go to sleep earlier is because we are scrolling in bed instead of letting our body wind down. Even if you have your phone next to you, you're going to have the urge to pick it up. Like I talked about in my willpower episode, you need to put yourself in a position where the only thing you have to do is to go to sleep. By no means am I saying this is going to be easy, because it's definitely not, but it's going to be necessary. When you wake up at 7 a.m. for the first couple days, it's going to be tough, but here are some things that help you wake yourself up. First is to immediately get outside and get some sunlight. Sunlight triggers our circadian rhythm to reset. You also need to be going outside when the sun is setting to trigger your suprachiasmatic nucleus to start secreting melatonin and have your body wind down. So now that you're up at 7 a.m. and got your sunlight, you need to do 20 minutes of exercise. This will raise your heart rate, warm up your body, and get rid of any excess sleep fog. I know this is going to sound terrible when you're tired, but it's proven in science to wake you up. Plus, after this initial exercise, you'll have all this BDNF circulating through your brain to help you become more efficient during your first study session. The last thing I want to say is that during your morning routine, you have to avoid caffeine within the first 90 to 120 minutes after you wake up. First off, during this time, caffeine doesn't even do anything because your adrenal system is working on overdrive to wake you up. Second, this actually makes you more difficult to fall asleep when you drink caffeine right when you wake up. So no caffeine when you wake up, and also no caffeine past 3 p.m. So I want you to pause the podcast now and write down 3 action items that you're going to implement tonight, not tomorrow, tonight, to help you improve your sleep. Physically write it down. Don't type it into your phone. Science shows that physically writing something down makes you more prone to follow through with your goals. Okay? So the first part is sleep. If you're not waking up at a consistent time, how are you going to schedule out your day? So let's move on into the time management section. Where should we be spending our time? Well, this is for you to figure out and to reflect on. Ask yourself, during the first half of the semester, what could you have improved upon? Maybe you started off strong and consistent, but fell off during midterm season when there was a lot more on your plate. Maybe you had a health or family issue that derailed you for a week and haven't been able to get back on track. I think a general theme, though, is that you aren't consistent enough in the optional work that doesn't have deadlines. You do the assignments, but you don't keep up with the material. You study only a week before the test, not 2 months before. You go to class not having pre-read and being prepared, which makes you feel lost and feel like going to class is a waste of time. You're treading water. Does this sound familiar? So I want you to make a priority on the independent study time where you are learning the material by yourself. Set a weekly goal. I'm going to be diving deeper into goal setting in season 2, but it's been shown in research that setting weekly goals is more effective than setting daily ones. So if you are someone who isn't regularly studying outside of class, don't set a weekly goals of 20 hours because that's not going to happen. Start small. Start setting a weekly goal of 7 hours of independent study, 1 hour per day. But what's great about weekly goals is that if you miss a day, hope isn't lost. You can still hit that 7 hours per week by just doubling up your study time the next day to make up for it. So what I want you to do is every Sunday night, create a rough outline for your week. See which days are really busy. Maybe you have class 8 hours one day and only 2 another. Or you have a doctor's appointment, club meeting, or other priorities. This allows you to see a wider view of your week, and you can prioritize your studying on the days that there isn't as much going on. A good rule of thumb is you should be studying at least 5 days out of the week. We don't want to cram all the 7 hours into a day or two because long-term learning happens when you are constantly reviewing the material day after day. Now, we should be trying to do this independent study time as early as you possibly can during your day. Since independent studying doesn't have a deadline or any extrinsic motivators to push you to do it, it can be very easy to push it off and not do it or replace the time with doing an assignment. But for example, if you have an 8 a.m. class and you have an hour commute or any situation like that, try to do it between classes and again, as soon as humanly possible. Once you hit your 7 hours in a week, go back and review the past week's schedule and see where you could have fit in another hour or 2 of studying. Then for the next week, increase it to 8 to 9 hours. We need to make small increases in our study time to be consistent. Don't think you're hot stuff because you're studying consistently 1 week in your entire life, okay? It's a great achievement, but if you double your study time the next week, even if you hit it, you'll be burnt out and won't be able to keep up with your pace. Again, pause the podcast and write down 3 things that you've neglected during the first half of the semester. Maybe you've been good about your studying, but haven't been sleeping well or working out. Then write down how many hours a week you're going to dedicate to each of the things that you listed, make a plan, and execute it. Now let's talk about how and what you should be studying during that time. Again, this is just the bones of it all. If you want a more detailed action plan, head to the show notes as there's an awesome study course that you can get into. But the biggest thing students do wrong when it comes to studying is not putting themselves in an environment to succeed. Meaning there's nothing to distract them. Not their phones, not their roommates, not their pets, not anything. Again, I will say it a million times. You need to put yourself in a situation where the only thing possible for you to do is studying. That could mean going to the library, because if you study in your room, you'll all of a sudden turn into a housekeeper and clean everything because you'd rather clean than do your work. So phone needs to be turned off and put in a separate room, or just leave it at home when you go to the library. Trust me, you're not that important and there aren't going to be any emergencies during that time. All these things will allow you to get into a state of focus that will enable you to get more done in a shorter amount of time. In terms of how long you should be studying, you should never study more than 90 minutes at a time before taking a break. This number is based on our alert cycle called our ultradian rhythm, which I'll dive deeper into in a future episode. Then, during your break, which should be at least 20 to 30 minutes afterwards, do something to recover. So that could be going on a walk, working out, eating a healthy snack, or take a 20-minute nap. Remember, naps are good. They aren't for lazy people. They help clean your brain while also consolidating memories of the things you just learned. Your eyes also need a recovery during this time as well. You've been narrowly focusing on your computer screen or book for 90 minutes. We need to change our view into a wider gaze. Think of this as going from a portrait mode on your iPhone that's narrowly focusing on your subject and blurs out everything else to going to panorama mode, where your view is a wide landscape. This helps our eyes recover and helps us able to refocus when we get back to work. But if you just go on your phone during the whole time we're in the break, this is not going to help you rejuvenate. So now that we're focused, let's get into the study techniques. Let's talk about the difference between passive and active learning. Passive studying includes reading the book, highlighting, and rote memorizing your notes. Rote memorization is the process of just reading something over and over in the hopes of memorizing it. There's no retrieval process. It's one of the worst ways to learn. Passive learning makes you feel like you're learning, but in reality, you can only recognize the material, but when you see it on a test or on a practice question, you can't answer it. Active learning is mentally intensive. Again, it's difficult. Example of this would be quizzing yourself using flashcards, doing practice problems, or writing a concept in your own words. These techniques force you to retrieve the information from your brain just like you would do on a test. When we are studying, we want to replicate the conditions of the test as much as humanly possible. That is why highlighting is such a terrible tool, because no test will ever ask you, please highlight the important information in this passage, right? I've never had a test like that. I tell people all the time, if your studying isn't making you feel challenged and making you feel mentally fatigued, you probably aren't doing it right, especially in the beginning. We constantly need to be checking if we really know the material. It's better to know what we don't know than to not know what we don't know. If that's confusing, rewind that and hear it again. I know when we get a problem wrong, it feels like we're stupid, but that is the time where we're actually getting those learning gains. Getting things wrong is the most important part of learning, just as those last couple reps in a set are the most important. When we're struggling, we are pushing ourselves out of our comfort zone to a place where we can improve our skills, and that never happens when we're studying passively. So prioritize active learning in your study routine. If you're feeling like your studying is more difficult than it usually is, then great, you're doing it right. You should feel that way in the beginning. Sometimes doing 20 minutes of flashcards is more mentally intensive than doing an hour of reading and taking notes from a book. I'm not saying that you should never read and take notes, but there is a correct way to do it. When you're reading, stop after a paragraph and see what you could rewrite what the author is saying in your own words in a way that only you will understand. Notes should be extremely unique to you. The more you can personalize them, the easier they're going to be to remember, and you'll actually need to review them less. So for me, I like sports, and I try to use sports analogies as much as possible when I'm trying to learn something new. An example of this would be comparing stem cells to LeBron James. A couple years ago, LeBron was done with the Cleveland Cavaliers and was a free agent. He was like a stem cell. He didn't have an assigned job in the NBA, just like a stem cell doesn't have an assigned job in the body. Then, LeBron signed with the Lakers, just like a stem cell can differentiate into different cell types to help heal diseases, like LeBron James made more baskets for the Lakers, right? Stem cells can proliferate and make more of themselves. So that's how I remember it. If you don't like basketball, this won't make any sense to you, but it doesn't matter. It's for me. I'm never going to forget what a stem cell is because of this analogy. This is how personalized your notes should be to a certain extent. Yes, I agree this is going to take more work in the front end, but it will save you more time in the back end because you won't need to review content as much, and you'll be able to review things for a longer period of time. Okay? So now I want you to pause the podcast for the third and final time, I promise, and write down 3 things you usually do when you study. Ask yourself, are you prioritizing active learning? If you aren't, write down the ways you can transition your studying to being a more mentally engaging process and then execute. So now let's get to some of your guys' questions. Remember us to follow us on social media at Student Performance Pod for your chance to be featured on one of these episodes. The first comes from Jessica from New Jersey, and she asked, I'm studying last minute because I'm a little burned out and nothing is sticking. How do I fix that? So the question of burnout is a multifaceted one. But one thing we have to recognize is that when we're feeling burned out, we aren't functioning at 100% capacity. So we shouldn't necessarily set a goal to focus and study for 90 minutes straight because that would seem insurmountable. I'm going to teach you a technique that Navy SEALs use for mental toughness. Now, Navy SEALs go through some of the most intense training in the world. They go through a training phase called Hell Week, where they run 200 miles, do thousands of push-ups, carry logs, all with only a couple hours of sleep in 5 days. The individuals who make it through Hell Week focus on small 15-minute periods. Their minds can wrap their head around going through 15 minutes of hell, but not 5 days of it. Once you start adding up those 15-minute intervals, it turns into hours and then days, and they're able to accomplish something incredible. So for you, if you're feeling burnt out, focus on studying without distraction for 15 minutes. Then check in with yourself. See if you can do another 15 minutes and then another, and so on. When you do need a break, which is going to be a little bit more often than usual, go outside and take a walk or catch up with family or friends on the phone. Take a nap. You need to do something that's going to improve your mood so you can get back to studying. Do not go on TikTok or watch Netflix because that will drain your energy and make you less focused. Save those things as a reward for the end of the day when you're done with your work. Make sure you're getting at least 7 hours of sleep so your brain can recover from the burnout. And to be honest, there's no simple answer to fixing burnout. But using the tools I just described, you can put yourself in a position to make recovery as quickly as possible while being productive at the same time. So great question there. The next question is from Adil from Pakistan, and he asked, how do I stay focused? I always have a million thoughts running through my head when I study. So another great question that I hear a lot, and your focus is like a muscle, guys. You need to train it to make it stronger. So one research-backed technique is a 13-minute meditation exercise that I went through in a previous episode, but let's go through it again. So you're going to set a timer for 13 minutes, and you're going to focus your attention on your breath and your third eye, which is this point right here on your forehead. But again, as I talked about in my meditation episode, the point of the exercise is to refocus your attention back to your breath when your mind eventually wanders off. So if you suck at it, that's okay, as long as you are continually refocusing your attention. The next thing I'll say is you have to understand how our working memory functions. It can only hold a small amount of information at a time that is used in the executive function of cognitive tasks. So that's why it's so difficult to focus when we're stressed or have a lot of thoughts running through our mind, because it's actually taking space and you're already very limited working memory. So you need a way to offload those thoughts. So this is another method based in science, is that I want you to set a timer for 3 minutes and just let your mind wander. What thoughts are going through your head? What are you telling yourself? Then I want you to write down all of your thoughts on a piece of paper. If necessary, write down how you're going to make progress on some of the stressors that are going through your mind. This offloading process tells your brain that your worries are going to be solved and relieve some of that space in your working memory to focus on your studying at hand. This is a very powerful technique that I recommend all of you guys use if your mind starts to wander when you study. All right, everyone. I hope this episode really helps you out and gave you actionable steps to turn your semester around. Like I said in the beginning, there is still hope, but you got to start being consistent today. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you have any more questions, feel free to leave them in the comments or send me a DM on Instagram. All right, everyone, I'll see you in the next one.